Busy week. Busy year. Next. Thank you.
Yeah, with that, do we want to turn it over to Ron to talk?
Great.
Sure, I can just add a few things.
I just got faked out by the picture from Save Our Water. I thought it was coming next.
That's SWRCB.com? Is that what you said?
That was the app you've been asking about for several meetings. So just a little bit of to add a little more to our discussion about Shasta and certainly the temperature ops plan that we've been working on. Building off of the kind of hindcast exercise that we went through as it was requested in the, I think back in the January order. Again, just the summary, last year where we saw the most difficulty and challenge with temperature management at Shasta was late in the year as we were trying to work with the last full side gate operation at the temperature control device there. So in discussions with my staff and then a number of folks that have worked with the temperature management and the device over the last decade, we've kind of concluded that the best approach going into this year, if we're going to have low water levels and lower volume of cold water as we get to later in the summer, is to push that part of the operation as far into the fall as we possibly can. They had two significant advantages. One is if things do start not working quite as we had hoped, then the ambient air temperatures are going to be able to probably at that time crossing over and actually helping to cool some of the water. So that's one advantage. The second one is that we've allowed them a lot more time for Chinook winter run to fry to emerge from the reds so that they're more mobile in the system. Particularly if it's later, they can actually move downstream and find some refugia where the ambient air temperature is probably cooling certain parts of the river. So pushing that part of the operation off until later was advantageous. So that's easier said than done. So that requires a pretty rigorous set of actions for releases to maintain the cold water and manage it pretty concisely as we go through, and to pretty much try to be very close to our temperature target as we move through the year. Now, we're actually looking for opportunities that aren't necessarily within the resolution of the model. Just last week, we've actually bypassed the power plant to skim some warmer water off the top of the lake through the dam outlets themselves to save maybe, we're thinking a week to 10 days of cold water management there. So we're saving our nickels and dimes as we go. But we think that we're able to stretch out this operation so that this particular key component of where we saw the real divergence of temperatures last year is pushed out to a place where it's going to be of far less risk. So that's in a nutshell our temperature plan, and we're going to have, we've been working very closely with Sac River Settlement contractors on every extent of flexibility that they have to be able to move their diversions and spread them out pretty evenly. It was really critical for the months of April, May that they did a lot of that. Now that's going to have a mix of some transfer proposals that they maybe didn't have on the table before. It presents a few other challenges for us operationally, but we kind of as the last component of this, it kind of helped actually be serendipity to kind of help the system. One of our concerns in previous years in trying to save water at Shasta for the next year would be once we got through the winter run season, we would drop flows pretty rapidly at Shasta to just conserve water. Well, we had a real concern with red dewatering for fall run Chinook, and we would find that we do a great job in ramping down very quickly and saving water, but we're actually losing some of the spawning beds that were available for fall run, and temperature concerns as well. So what we're doing is crafting where we're saving water through the transfers that are being generated by the settlement contractors on the Sac River through fallowing and groundwater substitution, and basically saving that water in Shasta and then redistributing that in the fall to help actually build a flow on top of our base operations to help with the fall run. Now, that's all great, but then that hits the delta, which is typically not a transfer window under the current biological opinion. So part of the bigger package of to-do list for us is to work with NOAA Fisheries and Fish and Wildlife Service and State Fish and Wildlife to expand the transfer window to accommodate this increment of flow that we're going to have in the fall so that we can move some of this transfer water into the fall time. So the buyers and sellers have to understand that this isn't necessarily a peak summer transfer. It's probably going to come on the backside, which means it's building some storage in San Luis for the transfer buyers next year. So they need to manage their current quantities that they've got well, but it seems to have lined up pretty well. So we're putting the final touches on exactly the timing and actual flows as we work just a couple of details with State Fish and Wildlife, and we'll have that to the board this week from the temperature plan.
And that's promising. So that's just taking maybe a finer look from the biological side at those conditions in the biological opinion in the fall. So they're sharpening their pencil from the biology to see where the flexibility is.
Last year, the current biological opinions have a pretty open-ended July, August, September ability to transfers. There's usually very little risk across all year types. When you get into October, at least the first half of November, there's some overlap potentially with some at-risk fisheries. So in this case, given the pumping rates are already at a low rate and we're adding an increment that's not so high, last year we did do a similar thing and we're able to navigate through that with very little fishery impact. So it's a box to check and certainly want to take a look at it and, true it up with what we anticipate our pumping rates would be this coming fall with the increment of pumping that we're looking at, which may be slightly more than we saw last year, but I think it'll all fit. And the preliminary indications that we can work through the fishery concerns as well. So I think we've been able to mold this. And like I said, the timing isn't great for the buyers, but all in all, there's at least a quantity there, which probably wasn't there before. Earlier in the season, we had talked with these same settlement contractors, and they were actually contemplating doing less transfers than they had done the year before. And now they're doing significantly more to kind of make this all work.
And then also, that's great. Thank you for explaining that. It's important for people to understand. And also not to forget about the fall run. That's our workhorse for California, and just keeping an eye out for that too. And so I think you're showing really, I think, an improvement in multi-objective work in a challenging atmosphere. Thanks.
I just wanted to punch a couple of elements of the provisional plan also that are important. Ron had mentioned the concern of what we had last year with red dewatering, also the losing the temperature control. The provisional plan is also intended to limit releases in the critical period in June, July, and August to levels lower than last year, so as not to have as great an effect. So really, in some ways, that's tied to, tied to everything else that's going on. You heard about the barriers. Part of the high releases is when there were higher depletions, but also higher need for delta outflow. So it's really a package thing in terms of, the barriers help to limit the call on Shasta, if you will, for meeting some of those water quality needs. One other point is that on the surface, as you saw and as Ron had described, we're targeted to get to an end of September storage that's the same as last year, which on the surface might seem problematic. There's more cold water, however, now in Shasta. Both the total volume, as you saw, is more now, and that's, I'd say, medium cold water. But there's also, and correct me if I'm wrong, some of the coldest water, there's about 100,000 acre-feet more than last year, which they're trying to now conserve through their operations through the summer. So it's cutting it, close, if you will, in terms of it's going to require tight operation, but it's those are the reasons why it looks different from last year.
Thank you. That was a really good explanation. I appreciate that. And thanks for all the hard work. A lot of moving parts that people can't understand, but it looks like what you're doing is going to meet more.
It is. Obviously, we're pulling pulling a lot of folks together, and we're talking with Sac River Summit contractors probably at least right now at least twice a week. Probably will be continuing that for April, May. Because there's always a little bit of a wrinkle, particularly as these districts then take this concept to their grower level, and they have some pretty large directors meetings in their individual districts, and they've come back and asked some questions. So we're doing a lot of trying to jockey around schedules and the like, and then how does this work in the Delta? But this was a real cornerstone for us in terms of building our Delta operations and thinking about Folsom and to some degree Oroville, but then also how we're going to deal with exchange contractors, Mendota Pool Supplies, all the way into the Friant system. That's been a lot of focus for us this week, trying to piece that all together, but without having some, something kind of set here, it was very difficult. But all of this is just indicating just how much linkage there is, and I think as Les said, the barrier in place and how does that allow us to, operate in a little more defined range than you might in a normal year, when you just have maybe a little more outflow to deal with some and absorb some particular changes to salinity in the tides that you just don't have the buffer that we would typically have because we're on the margin so much.
So I have a request for next briefing. I'd like to get a better handle on transfers, and it sounds like with this one that you focused on, you're not quite sure about what the amount would be, but it'll be fairly significant. Could we get a report on other transfers within the system? The consolidated place of use petition should be in place by the time you come back. So any information that you might have on what you think the total amount would be, and if you could identify some of the key transfers that will help move water around.
Between reclamation and DWR, we can come up with the state of the transfer market at the time. As of today, I can tell you it's pretty volatile, and there's a lot of moving parts. And part of it is the Feather River service area being pretty solidly at 50%. That a lot of transfers that were in the works kind of fell to the wayside. This discussion we just had about Sac River Summit contractors has put some more transfers potentially on the table, and they're still working out some of the details. But I think in the next month we should have at least some better idea that we can give you a kind of a graphic, or at least give you orders of magnitude particularly.
And I would say including south of Delta, any agreements, exchange contractor, Friant, or west side.
Hope that we can do that. There's horse trading all through the summer that goes on, particularly within the sub areas, but at least in terms of the cross, north Sac Valley to San Joaquin, east side of the San Joaquin to the west side, I think we'll have a pretty good idea as to what's happening with that by next month. We can certainly do that.
I hesitated to say anything because I'm glad you asked for the transfer presentation next time. I think that'll be good, particularly because for the citizen who's out there, largely in urban areas, who are seeing a 25% cut across the state in their urban water use, they continue to ask, what is the, what kind of cuts are coming in the ag water area, and generally we've been, I think, quite good at responding that you have a zero allocation for in some areas, and you have 20% allocation or more. I don't know where it is right now, but it was 20% in the state project, and so there are definitely big cuts happening, and we've talked a little bit today about the curtailments that are going to be even further cuts to senior water rights holders and others, but that isn't very well understood, particularly because there is a lot of trading going on and a lot of moving parts. And so I'm just wondering if there is some clearer, not better, but clearer language that we could be using to sum up the kinds of things that agriculture is doing and is enduring during this drought. And, but where there are, I just don't think people are getting it. They're getting that there's a drought, and the urbans are getting that they have to use less water. There's no doubt about that. And they know more or less how much less water they need to use. But I don't think they or the media understand what the where agriculture is in that. They hear these things, but there's not enough specificity as there is with urban. And maybe there can't be. And if there can't be, then we should say why. Why it's different and what it really does look like, and where there are big reductions and where there's a little bit of relief from the transfers or whatever. So I just think we need to do a better job of painting that agriculture picture than we have to date.
So I agree, and I'm actually working with Secretary Ross and had roped in Ms. Turkovich and Mr. Loeffler on this as well. I believe that she's also coordinating with DWR, so I'll make sure that we get Mr. Croyle involved in the discussions. But the idea is to put together a set of talking points that is as clear as possible, despite the fact that the waters are very murky. Right. Yeah.
No, thank you.
I think that's great. Like even a postable fact sheet would be
Exactly.
better than us just talking everywhere we can. I think, thank you. That's great.
Maybe if I can weigh in really quick on that. I think this has been an opportunity for various sectors to learn a lot more about water than we all thought we knew. And I think the connections are being made. Some of the conversations are difficult, but I think it is an opportunity for us all to educate the concerns, the benefits, what we all actually do to try to manage California's water at one level. And then, of course, try to add apples to apples doesn't really work when it's apples and oranges. But I think it is an opportunity, and the dialogue certainly with the media, since the governor's executive order has crushed some of us with a barrage of discussion, but also it's also opened those doors so we can have a more detailed, frank conversation. I know on the media side we have a lot more interest in really understanding what it all means. What is a water transfer? So those aren't conversations we've had with this broader urban environment, say. But water transfers are actually an important part of their water supply as well as agriculture. And so I think having that discussion at different levels, it has been helpful. And so maybe it's not as clear and as easy as we all want, but it is an opportunity, and I think we're all trying to take advantage of that. And so we're certainly interested in working closely with the board on making sure we got the most efficient conversation going, and also we're learning a lot along the way.
Right, and appreciate those comments. And also, let's take advantage of the new information that we're gathering. So, in the case of the urban, we've learned a lot in the last year, but also in the agriculture. And we had a detailed discussion about this at the last update, about the new information we're getting on demand from 2014. And it's apples and oranges, but it's still something we can look at as part of the overall, calculus for how agriculture is doing their part. And there's different ways to measure that. So we'll continue that dialogue. And thank you, Vice Chair Spivey-Weber, for voicing, I think, what we're all thinking. Thanks.
Conversation. Thank you very much for all the hard work, all of you.
Chair Marcus, would you like a brief update on the conservation regulations that we're moving through right now?
The what?
The what?
No, please.
So just to remind everyone that
Yeah,
tomorrow
please
is
do.
the close of the comment period, the very short comment period we acknowledge for the draft regulations. This is the second informal comment that we've sought on the development of the regulations to implement the 25% conservation standard statewide. We are working very diligently in a short amount of time to get as much input as we can. And I think it's really unprecedented, both the time frame as well as the amount of input. We've already started receiving comments in advance of the 22nd, which is tomorrow, and we will be working diligently to post all of those comments. They likely will not be up until Thursday sometime. I'm seeing Courtney shake her head yes. And then we will be turning those comments around and noticing an emergency rulemaking package, a formal notice on the 28th, which is the following Tuesday. I am aware that there are a number of groups that are looking at submitting alternative proposals. We're working with some of them on that right now, so it will be quite a crush over the next week or so. But that is an update of where we stand, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Our briefings, when do you expect the window for our briefings?
Likely it will be Monday of the following week. Prior to the notice going out. Next week.
Thank you. Thanks. We could spend as much time praising you and your team on the hard work you've been doing, that you're in the middle of it, but we'll save that. Just know we feel it deep in our hearts. We know how hard you've all been working on it. And I have some more comments that I got to give to you at some point. We'll now take a quick break, a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back to our remaining items.